Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up, I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes this day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now, if I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Well, hello everyone, and I know I look a little worse for the wear. Again, still dealing with this arm, but I wanted to get back to, I need to scoot over, there we go. I wanted to get back to some regular broadcasting. I still need to record my radio show for tomorrow, but because this arm is still pretty much killing me, I can't put on any makeup because I can't grip with this. It's a long story. But I'm glad some of you are watching this late. As always, this is participatory. Please, I didn't bring my drink, did I? Oh my God, this is going to be terrible. Because I'm going to get dry. Oh boy, I left my soda upstairs. Oh well, that's the way it goes. We have today and wanted to make sure, yeah, there's nothing naked on the cover here. We have today, and what's this bouncing at the bottom of my screen? It's probably some kind of update. Do not log in. Yeah, let me go to that. Anyone who has a Mac knows how when something in the Finder wants to get your attention, it just bounces along the bottom until you finally pay it attention. And with my ADHD, I'm like, I just can't ignore it. So please do say hi. But we will be going over from this March 1964 Playboy. And, it was such a sacrifice for me to have to look through this for you. There was an interview with Ayn Rand, and the cover says, "The Girls of Russia and the Iron Curtain Countries." Again, as I showed you guys before, this is like, it's a whiffy issue, meaning like it's been wet, and it smells like it's been wet. But apparently this is a very popular issue, so I didn't want to spend a great deal of money just to get this interview. So, as you can see on here, it's in there, and there's Ein. I do not know why she thought that hairstyle was attractive. One day I think you know what I'm going to do, maybe for one of my other skits that I do, like my Libertarian Activities Commission, which is coming up again. But I do want to put on makeup for that one, so I'm holding off on next week till that. But I did get a new prop for it. Remember I had those glasses last time. Well, I've got pink ones this time, comrades. So you can see a little better here. They're not terribly pink, but they're pink. So I'm getting ready to do another episode, but today we're going to be doing this. But before I forget, I would like to talk a little about the sponsors that we do have for this show. And remember, if you have a Liberty product, or even a Liberty message, or pretty much anything that's just not terrible, that you would like me to promote, my $25 a month sponsors or patrons, they get advertising. I do it almost every show, as you know. And Daniel 3 Biblical Anarchy is a show that supports this one. It's ran by my friend. If you would please check out that YouTube channel. The content, it's libertarian, quite obviously, but it's totally different than what we do here. So it gives you a variety. It does a lot more interviews. He did a really, really good interview with Angela McArdle. I'm sure he'll be doing more interviews with libertarian candidates. Also, though I haven't mentioned it in a while, and I will be seeing him in 2 weeks, or just under 2 weeks, we've got Tale of Two Brothers, which is written by Sean Dempsey out of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, and it is just an adorable children's book. You could pick it up on Amazon. I've read it. I enjoyed it, and I really hope that you would support libertarian projects, be they small businesses, be they authors, be they whatever they may be. I am the parliamentarian for the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire for their convention, and that should be a lot of fun. How is it that my grifting isn't going along the bottom of the screen, comrades? Here we go. Is it? There we go. It was going, and I just didn't see it. As you can tell, I'm a bit frazzled. It's been a busy week. What do I have to say about the grifting? Go to tinyurl.com/pinkflamemerch and get your Reno Reset t-shirts. I have not yet put up the Be Well shirt. I'm hoping to do that tomorrow. I still need to do the design. But if you are a Photoshop person, if you're a designer and you want to do a kind of a simple Be Well design, save me some time and get to see your art on one of my t-shirts, I would gladly receive that. And what else? Oh, all super chats matter. If you enjoy this content, and you can, all super chats do go to support my campaign. And hello there. Oh, yes, I will see you, Pat, in New Hampshire, and that will be a lot of fun. And last thing, if you can, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/pinkflameofliberty. I don't know why the dog's barking upstairs. That always concerns me when the dog's barking upstairs. But we're just going to, with this pre-history bonus, go over this Ayn Rand interview. I don't know if we're going to read the whole thing, because it depends upon how interesting it is, because it is quite long. And you know, we only get Playboy for the articles. That's of course what we do. But when I say it's prehistory, we're talking 1964. So that's nearly a decade before the beginning of the party. Well, 7 years before the beginning of the party. But let's see what Ayn had to say in this article. She's always quite interesting. So, title says, Playboy interview, Ayn Rand, a candid conversation with the fountainhead of objectivism. And one thing I'm eternally grateful for is that she's not the centerfold. No offense. She had a big brain, but not necessarily a model. Let's see here. Wow. Well, they got into sex with her right away. Let's let's look at some of these quotes that are on the bottom here. And remember, Ayn Rand and Nathaniel Branden, they had a little, something going on when they were both married. So let's see what she says here. Objectivist ethics holds that man exists for his own sake, that the pursuit of his own happiness is his highest moral purpose, that he must not sacrifice himself to others, nor others to himself. Now, something I want to notice here, I never really sat and examined much, because I don't know, I guess it just hasn't really interested me that much. The finer points between the difference between objectivism and libertarianism, if there is even a difference. Now, I know objectivists, allegedly, are strictly monarchists, so that would be one difference, where anarchists can be fully libertarian. But even just judging from that one quote, he says happiness is his highest moral purpose. I don't believe that could be a libertarian ethic, but I don't think it's the libertarian ethic. Let me explain. I see libertarianism as strictly a political philosophy. I don't, in which, of course, you want your politics to be moral, but morality is a much wider wider set than politics. And I see libertarianism as much narrower, with the political moral principle that you can't initiate force or fraud against another person. It seems to me that objectivism tried to be a complete set of morality, where libertarianism did not. So I think that's how I would see the difference. I'd be very, very curious, particularly if any of you used to be objectivists, like if D. Frank was in chat. I know he used to be an objectivist. A lot of early libertarians used to be objectivists. So perhaps, I wonder if that's accurate, what I just said. For instance, with Ayn Rand, excuse me, and her, altruism is evil type of thing, and selfishness is virtue. I don't see that as parts of libertarianism. I could see libertarians holding that, but I could also see libertarians holding something completely different. And I also don't see libertarianism as hostile to religion in the way that objectivism was. So let's look at this other quote here. A sexual relationship is proper only on the ground of the highest values in a human being. Oh, I don't even know if my sound is good. I had my mic all the way over here. Pardon me. My sound might not have been so good in the beginning. I really apologize for that. I forgot to bring this forward. So let's read that quote again. A sexual relationship is proper only on the ground of the highest values in a human being. I have no idea what the hell that's supposed to mean. What does that even mean? This is why I consider promiscuity immoral. Yeah, so she had this whole moral view. Again, consensual promiscuity. I don't think libertarianism has a thing to say about that, because it's a much narrower subset. Not because sex is evil, but because sex is too good. This is just pontificating. I don't see any sense in this. Not that I promote promiscuity, because I personally don't, but I don't care if you're promiscuous. It doesn't bother me. As I said, it doesn't smack my ass or pick my pocket. But this just seems to be a highfalutin. Like what I would say about that quote is, well, those are words. It's like a word salad. That didn't mean anything to me. Next, she says, collectivism as an intellectual power and a moral ideal is dead. Well, I think its soul is dead, but it's not dead in practice. It's still very much alive and kicking today. But freedom and individualism and their political expression, capitalism, have not yet been discovered. Well, I think they actually had been. Did she mean expressed or fully expressed? I don't know. Okay, so let's get on to the article. Because that was just like those little quotes. Oh my God, this is a long one. But let's see what we can get through it. And this is I really do want your comments and interaction, because objectivism is not something I've really explored. It seems much too restrictive for me, actually. Isn't that funny? Something that's supposed to be about freedom, I find quite restrictive. It says Ayn Rand. Okay, this is strange. Ayn Rand, an intense, angry young woman of 58. 58 is not young, and I'm saying that being almost 58 myself. That is a strange sentence. An angry young woman of 58. Well, maybe they mean young in spirit. I think I'm young in spirit. Is among the most outspoken and important intellectual voices in America today. She is the author of what is perhaps the most fiercely damned and admired bestseller of the decade, Atlas Shrugged, which has sold 1,200,000 copies since its publication 6 years ago and has become one of the most talked about novels in the country. Now, I'm going to make a very weird comparison here that some of you may think is arrogant. I don't mean it that way. I mean it like on a tiny, tiny little scale. But I did an interview earlier today where just within the very small pond of libertarianism, I was speaking with the host, and I said, well, there's one thing that could be said about me. Well, I think y'all can agree that I'm pretty intense, but it's that I make people feel something. There's usually no middle ground when it comes to me. People either like love me with like an intense devotion, or they can't stand me with an equally intense devotion. And in that, I feel a kinship with Ayn Rand. I don't particularly care for Ayn Rand, though. I like her work. I don't like her as a person. I think she was not a very nice person. Ayn Rand discussion clubs dot college campuses. Professors debate her ideas in their classrooms. More than 2,500 people in 30 cities from New York to Los Angeles attend courses given by the Nathaniel Branden Institute, in which they listen to live speakers and taped lectures expounding the principles set forth in the book. Thousands more subscribe to the Objectivist newsletter, and there is a lot of contradictions in the Objectivist newsletter. It kind of, you want to know what no, I'm not even going to, it just reminds me of a prophet of some religion that subtly changed their prophecies to suit their own predilections at times. That's what I see Ayn Rand doing a lot of times. I very much see her as a cultic figure. It says a monthly publication in which Miss Rand and her associates comment on everything from economics to aesthetics. And sales of her previous bestseller, The Fountainhead, have climbed to almost the 2 million mark. So, at the time of this article, then, The Fountainhead sold more than Atlas Shrugged. That's not true any longer, I don't believe. I think Atlas Shrugged has way outsold The Fountainhead, if I'm not mistaken. That any novel should set off such a chain reaction is unusual. That Atlas Shrugged has done so is astonishing. For the book, a panoramic novel about what happens when the men of the mind go on strike, is 1,168 pages long. It is filled with lengthy, that's an understatement, sometimes complex philosophical messages. I actually don't think the philosophy is complex. What is attractive about it is that it is actually quite simple and black and white. And it is brimming with as many explosively unpopular ideas as Ayn Rand herself. Despite this success, the literary establishment considers her an outsider, because it's not really a literary work. It's a philosophical work disguised as a novel. Almost to a man, critics have either ignored or denounced the book. She is an exile among philosophers, too, although Atlas is as much a work of philosophy as it is a novel. I guess that's what I just said. Liberals glower at the very mention of her name, but conservatives, too, swallow hard when she begins to speak. Well, because she shows their inconsistencies. For Ayn Rand, whether anyone likes it or not, is sui generis, indubitably, irrevocably, intransigently individual. I love that sentence. I would like to be described that way. I said it right the first time, and now I can't say it again. Indubitably, irrevocably, intransigently individual. Tongue twister, but I like it.
She detests the drift of modern American society. She doesn't like its politics, its economics, its attitudes towards sex, women, business, art, or religion. Well, I disagree with her on a lot of that, but not all of it. In short, she declares with unblinking immodesty, I am challenging the cultural tradition of 2,500 years, and she means it. A dark-haired woman with penetrating brown eyes. I don't see her as having penetrating brown eyes. I don't know. There was something about the style of journalism back then where they felt compelled to like physically describe people, and always in like terms like this, and they would often describe what they were wearing too. It wouldn't surprise me if the next sentence, I haven't read it, goes on to say what she's wearing, because it was just weird the way they did that then. It was a certain style. And a computer quick mind. This was in 1964. Were computers that quick? I don't know if saying somebody was computer quick in 1964 was that much of a compliment. Ein, rams with mine, Rand, was born to the family of a small businessman in St. Petersburg, Russia, where she lived through the Soviet Revolution. She attended the University of Leningrad, loathing communism and its philosophy. In 1926, she managed to leave the USSR, stayed for a few months with distant relatives in Chicago, then moved on to Hollywood. She had always wanted to be a writer. Since her command of English was somewhat less than adequate for writing fiction, she found a job preparing outlines for silent movies as she went about mastering her new language. Now the fact that she was able to write so well in English, considering her native tongue is Russian, is quite impressive. Between bouts of unemployment, she worked as a movie extra, waitress. I cannot picture Ayn Rand as a waitress. Newspaper subscription sales girl, and studio wardrobe department clerk. Then in 1936, she completed her first novel, We the Living, very good one, an attack on totalitarianism, set in Soviet Russia. She finished Anthem, another very good little short novel, about a society in which the word I had been extirpated in favor of the collectivist we. It was not until 5 years and 12 publishers' rejections later that her first commercially successful book, The Fountainhead, appeared, the story of an architect's battle for his own individuality. It became a national bestseller and was later made into a movie. For nearly a decade after that, Miss Rand struggled to write Atlas Shrugged, which she views not merely as a novel, but as the crystallization of a philosophy aimed at nothing less than reversing the entire direction of change in America, turning society toward a state of pure laissez-faire capitalism, even purer than that which existed during the 19th century, but her philosophy, which she calls objectivism, encompasses more than economics or politics. Okay, so that says what I said before. So my instincts about the very little I knew about objectivism are proven true. Primarily, it sets forth a new kind of, flip the page, ethics, which she defines as a morality of rational self-interest. It's going to get into the interview in a minute. This is just like the intro to the interview, as it were. There's going to be a question and answer, and I don't think I'm going to read the entire question and answer, because a lot of it, I don't know, deals with the ins and outs of Atlas Shrugged. I think it's trying to introduce the book perhaps to Playboy's audience. I think we are all pretty familiar with Atlas Shrugged, so I am going to pick and choose between some of these questions and ones that I think will be good discussions for us as libertarians. Today, Ayn Rand lives in a modest apartment in the East 30s of Manhattan with her artist husband, Frank O'Connor. And she was having an affair with Nathaniel Branden. It doesn't say that, but she was. She is planning another novel, which I don't think she ever did, and working on a long-range nonfiction project, a book on epistemology, the theory of knowledge. Though her progress on both projects is interrupted by a demanding schedule of speaking engagements around the country. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Atlas Shrugged was her last hurrah when it came to writing. Most of her working hours and her considerable energies are spent in the small blue-green study where she does most of her writing entirely in longhand. In a series of intellectually electric conversations Conversations with Playboy's interviewer Alvin Toffler, Miss Rand spoke clearly and urgently about her work and her views, answering question after question with a clipped, even delivery, her deep voice edged with a Russian accent. She paused only long enough between words to puff on cigarettes, held in a blue and silver holder. She loved her cigarettes and her cigarette holders. A gift from admirers, engraved with her initials, the names of the three heroes of Atlas Shrugged, and a number of diminutive dollar signs. The dollar sign in Atlas Shrugged is the symbol of free trade and therefore of a free mind. Okay. All right, so Playboy asks, what are the basic premises of objectivism? Where does it begin? And she says, it begins with the axiom that existence exists. I never really liked the A and A is A and existence exists. I don't know, that just not something that particularly appealed to me. I mean, it is a truism, which means that an objective reality exists independent of any perceiver or of the perceiver's emotions, feelings, wishes, hopes, or fears. Objectivism holds that reason is man's only means of perceiving reality and his only guide to action. By reason, I mean the faculty which identifies and integrates the material provided by man's senses. Now, here's what's interesting here. So she talks about an objective reality that exists independent of any perceiver, and that the rational faculty is all there is. But you could have two very rational people, though I know she held herself up as the paragon of rationality, that perceive things differently. How do you determine which is right? That's why I like the much more simplistic idea of libertarianism. Okay, let's see here. It goes a lot about, so she says the standard of value of the objectivist ethics is man's life, man's survival qua man, or that which the nature of a rational being requires for his proper survival. Okay, let's see here. Playboy asks about original sin. She says it is the concept of original sin that my heroine or I or any objectivist is incapable of accepting or of ever experiencing emotionally. It is the concept of original sin that negates morality. If man is guilty by nature, he has no choice about it. If he has no choice, the issue does not belong in the field of morality. Morality pertains only to the sphere of man's free will, only to those actions which are open to his choice. To consider man guilty by nature is a contradiction in terms. My heroine would be capable of experiencing guilt about a specific action. Only being a woman of high moral stature and self-esteem, she would see to it that she never earned any guilt by her actions. Almost talking like she believes in sinless perfection. Of course, I don't mean sin in the religious sense. I mean it more in the, not doing anything worthy of guilt. She would act in a totally moral manner. Is that possible for any human being? Again, maybe this is my religion talking. And therefore would not accept an unearned guilt. And then they ask here, in Atlas Shrugged, one of your leading characters is asked, what's the most depraved type of human being? His reply is surprising. He doesn't say a sadist or a murderer or a sex maniac or a dictator. He says the man without a purpose. Yet most people seem to go through their lives without a clearly defined purpose. You regard them as depraved. And she says, yes, to a certain extent. And Playboy asks why. She says, because that aspect of their character lies at the root of and causes all the evils which you mentioned in your question. Sadism, dictatorship, any form of evil is the consequence of a man's evasion of reality, a consequence of his failure to think. The man without a purpose is a man who drifts at the mercy of random feelings or unidentified urges and is capable of any evil because he is totally out of control of his own life. In order to be in control of your own life, you have to have a purpose, a productive purpose. Is that true? I don't think just because you don't necessarily have a clearly defined purpose, that means you are just on the brink of any kind of evil. And I think the Playboy author is going to, I guess the word is, she's quite severe, isn't she? I'm much more fun, I think, than that. Her objectivism, at least, is way too severe for me. Because here's what Playboy says: weren't Hitler and Stalin, to name two tyrants, in control of their own lives, and didn't they have a clear purpose? And she says, certainly not. They did, though. Okay, but she doesn't view their purpose as valid. Now, that's an evasion to me. They did have a purpose. It was an evil purpose. Okay. It says, Playboy asks, if a person organizes his life around a single, neatly defined purpose, isn't he in danger of becoming extremely narrow in his horizons? She says quite the contrary. Essential purpose serves to integrate all the other concerns of a man's life. It establishes the hierarchy, the relative importance of his values. It saves him from pointless inner conflicts. It permits him to enjoy life on a wide scale and to carry that enjoyment into any area open to his mind. Whereas a man without a purpose, now notice she just said without a purpose, where Playboy said a single, neatly defined purpose. So she's talking about something a little different than he is. A purpose doesn't have to be singular, nor does it have to be neatly defined. At least I don't think so. And this Playboy interviewer is nailing the things that I'm feeling when I'm reading this. He says, couldn't the attempt to rule whim out of life, to act in a totally rational fashion, be viewed as conducive to a juiceless, I like the way he described it, juiceless, joyless kind of existence? And Rand says, I truly must say I don't know what you're talking about. Let's define our terms. And there's this hard time folding this. This is a very thick magazine, and it's on the fold. I'm having a hard time doing this. Reason is a man's tool of knowledge, the faculty that enables him to perceive the facts of reality. To act rationally means to act in accordance with the facts of reality. Emotions are not tools of cognition. I absolutely and utterly disagree. And I think she is missing the very rich, emotionally cognitive side of life. That right there is my problem. What you feel tells you nothing about the facts. How do you know then if you love somebody? I guess she thinks you can only rationally love somebody. It's your feelings that tell you that. Emotions, where's she go on here? It merely tells you something about your estimate of the facts. But that's all your rationality tells you too. Emotions are the result of your value judgments, not necessarily. They are caused by your basic premises. Then why is it that sometimes you're attracted or fall in love with something that you rationally shouldn't at all? I guess she would say you probably have some kind of mental defect. I don't know. I think she's trying to fit life into a neat box that it doesn't fit into. A whim is an emotion whose cause you neither know nor care to discover. A lot of people care to discover why they have certain whims. Now, what does it mean to act on a whim? It means that a man acts like a zombie, and zombie is spelled without an E. That's weird. I wonder if that was a typo or if that's the way zombie used to be spelled. Did zombie ever used to be spelled Z-O-M-B-I? without any knowledge of what he deals with, what he wants to accomplish, or what motivates him. Not necessarily. That's not what whim means. It means that man acts in a state of temporary insanity. You're temporarily insane when you do something on a whim? Is this what you call? Let me try to do, I can't do a Russian accent, but I'm going to try it anyway. Is this what you call juicy or colorful? Yes, Ms. Rand, it is. I think that the only juice that can come out of such a situation is blood. My. I've bought a cute pair of shoes. That's not a word. I have purchased a cute pair of shoes on a whim, and no blood came out of that situation whatsoever. Playboy asks, should one ignore emotions altogether, rule them out of one's life entirely? And I think she should say yes, but she says no. And she acted quite irrationally when she found out that Nathaniel Brandon dumped her for a younger woman. Of course not. One should merely keep them in their place. An emotion is an automatic response, an automatic effect of man's value premises. An effect, not a cause. Don't necessarily agree. Wow, check this out. See, she's just so judgmental. Playboy says, according to your philosophy, work and achievement are the highest goals of life. Do you regard as immoral those who find greater fulfillment in the warmth of friendship and families? I certainly don't. Because I believe in self-ownership and self-determination, and as long as you aren't harming other people. But she says if they place such things as friendship and family ties above their own productive work, yes, they are immoral. I don't think I could disagree stronger. Connor says, let me put this on the screen. But I think I disagree with you, Connor, but I would love to hear what you have to say. He says, I think you have to look at her responses from the date in which they were received. Things were very different. Okay, this is 1964. I was only born 3 years later. I don't think things were that much different in the 60s. I mean, there were definitely a lot of societal changes. So if we start talking about the place of women or sexual attitudes, and if she was only talking there about, I could see what you're saying, if she was maybe limiting this to women, where maybe the attitudes at the time were that women shouldn't value work, that they should only value family. But she's not limiting it to that. And she's very precise in what she says. I don't think things were that much different in the 60s. I don't know. I mean, it could be right. That's a valid, like, how do I even want to put this? Because you didn't offer criticism. That's a valid insight you might be offering there. I'm just not so sure I agree with it. She just seemed like kind of a slave driver. In a way, like, listen, I'm the type of person where my husband will tell you I'm the hardest working person he's ever met in his life. And I think what he means more by that is like, I never stop and I'm very driven. But I don't think that makes me like highly, that isn't, I mean, I believe I'm a moral person, but I don't think that's what makes me moral. In fact, I think the fact that I don't place more value on family and friendship and spending time in that way actually is a flaw. Where she would view my drive as like this higher moral impulse. Meanwhile, I think I would be a more complete person if I spent more time with my husband, if I tried to cultivate a better relationship with my sister, who I'm not terribly close with. And I think I probably will regret that as I get older. And most people, as they get older and, you know, they're towards the end of their life, what's the saying? They don't regret that they didn't work harder. They regret that they didn't spend more time with their family. So she goes on to say, and I just think this is warped. I think something happened to her in her childhood that, like, I don't know. It says friendship, family life, and human relationships are not primary in a man's life. She's denying, I think, that human beings are inherently social creatures. No, not. I'm making a generality because some people are more loners than others. I obviously am. She quite obviously was. But it says, a man who places others first above his own creative work is an emotional parasite. I think she's equating valuing spending time with family and friends above work as placing others above oneself. But no, that's actually valuing time with families and friends could actually be quite selfish in her view of selfishness, because that's what you get enjoyment from. And didn't she say earlier, I think she's contradicting, let me go back to that earlier quote here. She says, our ethics hold that man exists for his own sake, that the pursuit of his own happiness is his highest moral purpose. So if he's happier being with his family than with working, do you see how I'm seeing a contradiction here? But the contradictions appear like 1,000 words apart, and unless you're talking this through like we're doing here, you might not notice it. But I don't know. I really disagree there. There's always something about Ayn Rand that always rubbed me the wrong way, and I think that's part of it. And I think Connor, I'm going to put this up here, is right too. You can't take the small things in life for granted. They're quite large. Ironically, that is in fact true. Now she's getting into something that might be very 1960s oriented. He says, Playboy says, do you believe that women as well as men should organize their lives around work? And if so, what kind of work? She says, of course, I believe that women are human beings. What is proper for a man is proper for a woman. The basic principles are the same. I would not attempt to prescribe what kind of work a man should do, and I would not attempt it in regard to women. Well, I agree with her there. Though I don't agree with her that there's like statistically absolutely no differences, because I just think that ignores reality. But in isolation, I absolutely would agree with her. And then he asks, again, this is very 1960s. In your opinion, is a woman immoral who chooses to devote herself to home and family instead of a career? And Rand says, not immoral. But that kind of contradicts what she said before, doesn't it? But she seems to limit it a bit here. She says, not immoral, I would say she's impractical, because a home cannot be a full-time occupation except when her children are young. That is wrong. Your children can be a full-time occupation even as they're getting older. What if you're homeschooling your children? Maybe she would consider that work. But there are other things still you could be doing. I think a home can be a full-time occupation even when your children are not terribly young. And here she equivocates, I think, a bit. However, if she wants a family and wants to make that her career, okay, good, at least for a while. Well, thank you, Queen Ayn Rand. It would be proper if she approaches it as a career. Okay, who the F do you think you are that you get to tell people how they're going to approach their family? It's the judgmentalism. It's like objectivism reminds me of puritanicalism in a way, in how severe it is. That is, if she studies the subject by which she wants to bring up her children, if she approaches her task in an intellectual manner. Okay, let's see here. You hold that one's own happiness is the highest end and that self-sacrifice is immoral. I do not believe that self-sacrifice is immoral, but that could be coming from my religious background. But even not from a religious background. I don't think self-sacrifice is immoral. I don't think, if you're not harming other people, that she has any right to judge as moral or immoral what a person decides to do with their life. I think, actually, in my own morality, that her judgment is immoral, if that makes sense. It says, does this apply to love as well as work? And she says, to love more than to anything else. When you are in love, it means the person you love is of great personal, selfish importance to you and to your life. If you were selfless, it would have to mean that you derive no personal pleasure or happiness from the company and existence of the person you love, and that you are motivated only by self-sacrificial pity for that person's need of you. I don't think that's quite so black and white. Wow. I don't have to, love is not self-sacrifice. Love can be self-sacrifice. What about parents that sacrifice themselves for their children? But the most profound assertion of your own needs and values. It is for your own happiness that you need the person you love, and that is the greatest compliment, the greatest tribute you can pay to that person. I do think in everything we do, there is an element of selfishness to it, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I don't think everything we do is for pure selfishness. I do think there is a noble selflessness. That is a point where I fundamentally disagree with her. And I think she's trying to be a Vulcan. She says, and this is very 1960s bound here, I think. Now, O'Connor, that you said that, I'm trying to view this more in the time of the 60s. You have denounced the Puritan notion that physical love is ugly or evil, yet you have written that indiscriminate desire and unselective indulgence are possible only to those who regard sex and themselves as evil. Would you say that discriminate and selective indulgence in sex is moral? Rand says, I would say that a selective and discriminate sex life is not an indulgence. The term indulgence implies that it is an action taken lightly and casually. I say that sex is one of the most important aspects of a man's life and therefore must never be approached lightly or casually. And she sounds like a preacher when you say with that. It's so strange. I think sex can be a very important part of one's life, but I don't think it's one of the most important any more than, it's a need, like eating is a need, but I don't think your meals are one of your most important. It depends on your individual values. For some people it is, but I think some people, perfectly moral people, have casual sex lives. That's not me, but I don't look down on people who that is. So sex must not be anything other than a response to values. Okay. I don't know. I think sometimes a cigar is more than a cigar, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And that's why I consider promiscuity immoral. Not because sex is evil, but because sex is too good and too important. That's what she had said before. I think that's just a word salad. Does this mean, Playboy asks, in your view, that sex should only involve married partners? Now, we know she doesn't agree with that, since she was bumping uglies with Nathaniel Brandon when she was married to somebody else. She says, not necessarily. What sex should involve is a very serious relationship. Whether that relationship should or should not become a marriage is a question which depends on the circumstances and the context of two persons' lives. I consider marriage a very important institution, but it is important when and if two people have found the person with whom they wish to spend the rest of their lives. See, that's funny. So Rand was a bit promiscuous. She's holding marriage to be an important institution, yet she certainly broke it as a traditional institution when both she and Nathaniel, who were both married at the time, had a long-standing affair. Now, it wasn't a secret affair, but it was an affair nonetheless. Okay. All right, now this interests me, because this next question, because this is something that comes up in libertarianism quite a bit, and it's one reason why I find it funny the way some people will accuse the Mises Caucus people of just being these strict conservatarians, and I think a lot of them might be conservatarians, but I certainly am not, and I think my discussion on this chapter right here will prove this. And they certainly accept me just fine because I don't try to push my values. Says, Playboy asks, as one who champions the cause of enlightened self-interest, how do you feel about dedicating one's life to hedonistic self-gratification? And I'm just going to say before I read her answer, if someone's not harming another person and that's what they want to do, I have no problem with somebody who wants to dedicate their life to hedonistic self-gratification. In fact, I think that is at least not necessarily one's entire life, but for portions of one life, that's a perfectly natural desire. She goes, I am profoundly opposed to the philosophy of hedonism. I don't actually think you are, Ein. I just think that you cloaked it in other things, because your indulgences with Nathaniel Brandon, I think, were certainly hedonistic. And then when he dumped you for a younger woman, I don't know. Let's continue. Hedonism is the doctrine which holds that the good is whatever gives you pleasure, and therefore pleasure is the standard of morality. Wait a minute. So she's disagreeing with that, but let's go back to that quote on page 1 again. The highest moral purpose is happiness. Is she making some kind of weird distinction between pleasure and happiness? Isn't being happy giving yourself pleasure? And I don't mean it in a dirty way. We're reading Playboy here, so I have to be careful in the way I'm wording that. I think she just contradicted herself again. Because I think holding that your highest moral purpose is your own happiness is a form of hedonism. Objectivism holds that the good must be defined by a rational standard of value. That pleasure is not a first cause, but only a consequence. But is happiness a first cause, or is that only a consequence, which you already held on page 1 where we read here that was the highest moral value? Okay. To say that pleasure should be the standard of morality. Okay, let's just substitute in the word happiness, which she used earlier to say is the standard of morality, and see if the sentence still makes sense, and I think it does. To say that happiness should be the standard of morality simply means that whatever values you happen to have chosen, consciously or subconsciously, rationally or irrationally, are right and moral. It fits. She's just using a different word, but it's the same thing. It says this means that you are to be guided by your chance feelings, emotions, and whims, not by your mind. How is that any different for your earlier standard of happiness? Just because here you call it pleasure? It almost sounds as if she's a bit masochistic. I might not be explaining this right, but if she's not equating happiness and pleasure, it means that she's getting happiness from things other than things that give her pleasure, which is a form of masochism. Or self-sacrifice, which she already denounced. She says, my philosophy is the opposite of hedonism. I hold that one cannot achieve happiness by random, arbitrary, or subjective means. Hedonism doesn't necessarily imply that either. Most hedonists are not random, they're not arbitrary, and happiness by its own self is subjective. Everything is subjective. Anything that you're determining makes you happy is subjective. Otherwise, the exact same things would make everybody happy, and they don't. No. Okay. Playboy asks, you have said that the kind of man who spends his time running after women is a man who despises himself. Would you elaborate? Rand says this type of man is reversing cause and effect in regard to sex. Sex is an expression of man's self-esteem, of his own self-value. But the man who does not value himself tries to reverse this process. He tries to derive his self-esteem from his sexual conquest, which cannot be done. Not necessarily. Maybe he just likes variety. And it has nothing to do with conquests. Maybe he doesn't view the women as conquests at all. Oh, I'm going to disagree here too. Playboy, you attack the idea that sex is impervious to reason, but isn't sex a non-rational biological instinct? You notice I'm keeping mostly to the sex questions here because I think those are the most relevant to a Playboy interview. That's what they know a lot about, I would suppose. She says, no, to begin with, man does not possess any instincts. False. Absolutely false. I wonder how many of you out here think that man does not possess any instincts. She's not religious, so she doesn't believe that man is a special, unique creation of God, which means that we evolved from lower, if you want to use that word, but we evolved from other mammals. What, we're the only mammal that doesn't have instincts? This makes no scientific sense. I'm using rationality here, Rand. It makes absolutely no rational or scientific sense to say that man, Homo sapiens, does not have any instincts. We have a lot of instincts. A lot of instincts keep us alive. Women will tell you that. I mean, women have a lot of instincts of, like, I say a lot, like, when they're telling, like, you know, women who are more vulnerable than men, who are weaker, you know, trust your instincts. When something's telling you that something is off about this guy or something is off about the situation, even though your rational mind might not be able to put your finger on it, trust your instincts. That has to be one of the dumbest sentences I have ever read from her, that man does not possess any instincts. I agree with you, Connor says. I believe every human possesses instinct. That's crazy. All right. And then Playboy asks, isn't the individual equipped with powerful, non-rational biological drives? I also think that is indisputably true. And she says he is not. So again, I don't know how she explains this in a non-religious manner. I could see, even though I don't agree as a religious person, I could see how a religious person could say, well, you know, man is different from every other animal because they are a special creation of God, created in the image of God type of thing. But being a non-religious person, I'm going to just assume she believes in evolution. How is it that she thinks that we are so different? Does she... Okay. Huh. Says, man is born with certain physical and psychological needs, but he can neither discover them nor satisfy them without the use of his mind. But that is also true of a dog. A dog who is hungry will reason how to find food. And everyone thinks I am an iconoclast or an ideologue, but not compared to her. Playboy asks, in Atlas Shrugs you wrote, there are two sides to every issue. One side is right, the other is wrong. The middle is always evil. Isn't this a rather black and white set of values? In 75% of the case, I would agree with what she said. But I do think there is a gray area in about 25% of the cases, and it's not evil. So anyone who thinks I'm an iconoclast or ideologue, take a look at Ayn Rand. She says it most certainly is. I emphatically advocate a black and white view of the world. I do not. A lot of times it is, and a lot of issues it is. But in some other issues, it just simply isn't. And you want to know what I think, and I know this is going to seem a strange thing, who was so good at showing how there is gray. There's gray, even in one person, is I can't remember, George R. Is it R.R. White? The guy who wrote Game of Thrones. Those characters were so complex that really made you question your view of absolute good or absolute evil. And Playboy says, then you believe in absolute? She says, I do. I do as well, but that doesn't mean that everything is absolute. You can believe in absolutes without believing that everything is an absolute. Okay, it says, you have said you are opposed to faith. Do you believe in God? She says, certainly not. Okay, I'm not. Doesn't really get too interesting about religion here. He asks, has no religion, in your estimation, ever offered anything of constructive value to human life? She says, qua religion, no, in the sense of blind belief. Belief unsupported by or contrary to the facts of reality and the conclusions of reason. Obviously, as a religious person, I'm going to absolutely disagree with her, and I would think some of her own statements before disagree with her. But I don't, religion's just one of those things I don't care to argue about. But she does say, as philosophy, some religions have very valuable moral points, and I would agree with her there. Nearly every religion does, even religions I don't agree with. She says, do you consider Playboy asks, do you consider wealthy businessmen like the Fords or the Rockefellers immoral because they use their wealth to support charity? She says, no, that is their privilege if they want to. Okay, that's a relief to hear. My views on charity are very simple. I do not consider it a major virtue, and above all, I do not consider it a moral duty. I disagree with her both there. I do consider it a moral duty, and I do consider it a major virtue. But let me distinguish. Moral duties are not justice duties, and that's why, and I think I need to do a whole show on this, on how I think we need to, as libertarians, distinguish between justice and morality. Morality is much wider than justice. You have no obligation in justice to deliver charity. You can't be forced to. You haven't committed injustice against somebody if you do not help a person in need. But I do believe as a human being you do have a moral duty, and that's something that's completely separate. She, to me, conflates the two way too much. To her, morality and justice are the same thing. Wow, okay, I never really worded it that way, but I do think that might be another major difference between objectivism and libertarianism. Playboy asks, and this is a deep question, what is the place of compassion in your philosophical system? She says, I regard compassion as proper only towards those who are innocent victims. Woo! I'm compassionate, or I try to be compassionate toward everybody, and it's not even a try. I find my empathy and compassion goes out to people even who she would think don't deserve it, even to people who have done some really bad things. I can't imagine viewing compassion as only proper towards those who she says are innocent victims. That actually is quite a deep question. Yeah, and I agree with this question, Connor. I'm going to put this up here too. He says, I wonder how she would view liberty. Well, I know she hated libertarians and libertarianism. I don't want to say she hated libertarians, but libertarianism. In terms of black and white, black versus white in life, if we have liberty, is there really black and white areas of personal values? Yeah, that's what I'm struggling with here. I don't think it's liberty. If you say this personal value that harms nobody else, notice harming other people doesn't enter into any of this conversation yet. It does in a little way, but it's not front and foremost as it has been in nearly every statement of mine. And she views what she would think harming yourself as being something that's morally wrong. And I even might, or even not even morally wrong, but just evil or even unjust, where I think if you own yourself, you have the right to do with yourself what you want. I don't know. I think we're getting to the heart of the differences, though. Okay, let's see. Again, they go far afield, and I have to be honest. I think after a while, the way she repeats herself with some of this just really hard line, and it is dogma. She denies it's dogma. It gets kind of boring to me. Check this out. Now, this has nothing to do with Ayn Rand. In the middle here, there's bunny money. I guess bunny money for, get more Playboy magazines. I don't know. I thought that was cute. Bunny money. Okay, let's see. This interview, this goes on and on. I'm just trying to find. We get into more things that. Did my centerfold fall out? We cannot have. No, this is the cover, I think. I can't show you the centerfold, obviously, no, this was just the cover on YouTube, or I will get censored. What, in your view, is the proper function of government? This is more interesting to me. She's a strict minarchist. Basically, there is really only one proper function, the protection of individual rights. Since rights can be violated only by physical force, they can be violated by fraud as well. I think she agrees with that. She was just being simplistic here. And she goes on, and by certain derivatives of physical force, which is fraud. The proper function of government is to protect men from those who initiate the use of physical force from those who are criminals. Force in a free society may only be used in retaliation and only against those who initiate its use. This is the proper task of government. And most libertarians would agree with her there. And actually, since she's using the word government, I would agree with her there as well, because properly understood, at least libertarian anarchists aren't against government, they're against the state. It's different. And she says, in principle, I believe that taxation should be voluntary, but how one would implement this is a very complex question. I agree with her. Okay. And she's against the draft. And I agree with her here. Playboy asks, what about other public needs? Do you consider the post office, for example, a legitimate function of government? She says, let's get this straight. My position is fully consistent. Not only the post office, but streets, roads, and above all schools should all be privately owned and privately run. She's braver than most libertarians today who won't say that any longer. I advocate the separation of state and economics. I agree with her. Now here's where we would disagree, because she was not a non-interventionist. What about, Playboy asks, what about force and foreign policy? You have said that any free nation had the right to invade Nazi Germany during World War II. She says, certainly. She says a dictatorship, a country that violates the rights of its own citizens, is an outlaw and can claim no rights. I agree, but does that mean you have the right or the obligation to force your own citizens into pursuing that outlaw? Okay, let's see. They get into some Barry Goldwater politics here. She says at the present she would vote for Goldwater, though she disagrees with him on a great many things, but she agrees with his foreign policy. And at this time, it says she is opposed to Richard Nixon. But later in life, we dealt with this when, who was it? Clark, I think it was, in an episode, in an issue of LP News, noted how Ayn Rand was in favor of Nixon in the 70s. So she changed her opinion by then. But of course, I wonder how she would justify that. She says, I consider National Review the worst and most dangerous magazine in America. Oh, that's funny. I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, I'm not a fan of National Review. I just think it's funny the way she just took that shot at it. But here's her reason why she thinks so. Because it ties capitalism to religion. She says, the ideological position of National Review amounts, in effect, to the following. In order to accept freedom and capitalism, one has to believe in God. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I know there was a lot of religion in it, but I don't think National Review at the time, I'm just not a conservative, which is why I found that all amusing. I don't think they think that you would have to believe in God. I could be wrong. I'm not an expert on National Review. Playboy. Are there any political groups in the United States today of which you approve? Now, remember, the LP didn't exist back then, but even if it did, she did not approve of the LP, but just wanted to make that clear. She says political groups as such, no. Is there any political group today which is, and then it goes, this is a really in-depth article. I'm going to maybe have to get a Playboy subscription for the articles. Let's see. It goes to page 64. So she says, fully consistent. Such groups today, because this magazine got wet, it's very musty smelling, and opening those pages made me gag a little. Such groups today are fully guided by or advocate blatant contradiction. Playboy, do you have any political aspirations yourself? Have you ever considered running for office? Rand, certainly not. And I trust that you don't hate me enough to wish such a thing on me. That's the best quote in this whole interview. And here she defines her hatred towards altruism, which I do think is very misunderstood, and she worded it badly. So even though this isn't like one of my favorite topics of hers, I want to read this to let her speak for herself. Oh my God, Connor, you are terrible. I'm going to put this on the screen just because it's gross. Connor says, what did that magazine get wet with? One never knows, I suppose. Now I don't want to touch it. Thank you, Connor. Thank you. So Playboy says, and how would you define altruism? She says, it's a moral system which holds that man has no right to exist for his own sake, that service to others is the sole justification of his existence, and that self-sacrifice is his highest moral duty, value, and virtue. Now, that's not how I define altruism. And if that was the only possible definition of altruism, I would agree with her that altruism is evil, but I don't think that is... That might be her definition of altruism, but I do not think that is the definition of altruism. Okay, let me see. Here we're almost to the end here. Do you believe that objectivism as a philosophy will eventually sweep the world? And I'm glad I don't, because people are not robots. She's very robotic. She says, nobody can answer a question of that kind. Men have free will. There's no guarantee that they will choose to be rational at any time or in any generation. But I like this, where she said, because I think we libertarians, when we ask if libertarianism will sweep the world, I like this sentence. She says, nor is it necessary for a philosophy to sweep the world. To change things, you don't have to sweep the whole world with a philosophy. Let me see here. And I think that's the most interesting questions in here. A lot of these we would have heard before. But I think we had a pretty interesting discussion on some of these things. I think I understand. Yeah, I can't show you I'm going to look at the centerfold, but pretty girl. It's not, actually, it's one of the more, well, Playboy's been pretty tasteful. I mean, Playboy's not Hustler, but even for Playboy, that there was only boobs shown in that centerfold. It didn't show South, if you know what I mean. I want to see if there's anything else interesting in here, because some of these advertisements are interesting. Oh, and here's the Girls of Russia. And none of them are showing anything pornographic. There's a little bit of it doesn't show nip, so it's just a little, it's just some pictures of some pretty Russian girls. Yeah, there's some nudity on this page. Can't show you that one. Yeah, a lot of nudity on these other pages. Just want to see if there's any nice photography I could show you in here. Well, this is a very pretty girl. I can cover up the nip. But she's cutie pie. So this is just an issue on the beauties of Russia. Let's see if there's any interesting ads. How to win friends and influence people. There's an article in here. How to talk dirty and influence people. A lot of cartoons. Playmates Revisited from the 1955. Oh, these are some classic pictures. Oh, here's Betty Page. I can cover up the nip shot. I love Betty Page. So you can see up in the top there's a Betty Page picture. I don't think I covered it quite enough. So if Playboy wants to give me a hard time for showing a little nip. Oh my God, look at the high-waisted pants on this dude. This is an ad for Lee pants, but look at that guy. He looks very derpy, doesn't he? Look at how high-waisted those pants are. It's like mom jeans on a guy. Guitar ad. Playboy was $7 a year back then. Not many advertisements in this one. There were some really interesting advertisements in that other issue of Playboy we were looking at. But not many in this one. It says, who says you can't afford a color TV? That's funny. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Nice little old car. It says you'd be proud too if your name was Spitfire. So check out that classic car. But that's about, not many good advertisements in this issue. But so there we go. I found it an interesting interview, a bit too long to just read it all online, but so that's early liberty history. I hope you found that interesting as well. I, for one, am glad that we're not following the objectivist philosophy. I think libertarianism is much freer, much more individualistic than this narrow strictures that Ayn Rand would put us into. All right, so let me let you know what's coming up. Saturday, obviously, I think I'm going to have my radio show, but I think I'm actually going to call in and do that radio show live rather than recording it because it's getting awful late tonight. I just got to make sure I have an engineer there. And I like doing it live every once in a while. And I'm thinking the subject I'm going to cover is debunking the myth of the wasted vote. So I think I wanted to go down to storage. I probably can still go down to storage between Saturday and Sunday, but I think I'm going to do my radio show live. I was stressing. It's 11 o'clock now. I don't want to be up till 3 in the morning. My arm just starts aching. Sunday. Is it Sunday? The 23rd. Is Sunday the 23rd? There's 2 things going on Sunday. The JC, so maybe I will not get down to storage. The JC, and that's probably not the best thing for my arm anyway. So on Sunday, we have an LNC meeting on Massachusetts. Tomorrow night, after I see more what the LNC's talking about, they're trying to cancel that meeting. I'll talk about that probably tomorrow. And there's also the continuation of the Judicial Committee hearing. Tomorrow's Friday night. I'm going to try to get back to my traditional Friday night LP News history. So I will see you then. Again, there's my shameless grifting along the bottom. I didn't really say this at the beginning, but I would like to get back to where I was at the end of 2021 in my patron goals. I did get 2 new patrons this month. I have their names at the end of my show. I don't like mention individually sometimes because some people don't like that and they get embarrassed. I should ask people when I thank them for their patronage if I can call them out individually. But thank you very much. You know who you are. And if you can become a patron, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. I'm glad I'm back in the saddle. Sorry I don't have my makeup on. That will be a little while, but I hope you all have a great night, and I thank you for spending this evening with me. And let's get up the new ending patrons, because I had to add those 2 new patrons. Actually, it was 3 new patrons. I got 2 new $5 a month patrons and 1 new $1 a month patron. And remember, you get access to my private Discord when you become a patron. All right, let me pull up this file. Did I download it? I did, and we will have a good night. Mi guapas de libertad.
What you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business, not because they want to